Colleagues and my dear friends, students, a very good morning to one and all. At this outset, I would like to thank this opportunity. So the topic given to me is conduct of research study. We all conduct research for various reasons. As postgraduates, it's mandatory to conduct research to get completion of the course and to get the degree. And some of you might be really interested to study about a particular problem and find a solution. So out of own interest, we conduct research. Similarly, we also conduct research for publication purpose. As its current era, publication is very important and we are supposed to do research and publish as much as possible. Whatever be the reason why you are doing research, there are certain important steps which needs to be followed when you are conducting your research. If you miss any of those steps, the entire research process will become a wasteful exercise. And these are mistakes which you cannot go back and correct. Once it's done. The entire research is of no use. So I'm going to cover some of those important steps which needs to be addressed when you are planning your research or when you are actually conducting your research. So for the next 30 minutes, I'm going to cover this topic under the following headings. Initially, start with what is research strategy, how to plan and how to implement your research strategy. Followed by that, some of the important steps like study tool validation, sampling, blinding, randomization and allocation. Most of you would have heard about these terms. These are very important and we will see how to do each of those steps. And a little about pilot study, which is not mandatory for all the research process, but for certain studies needs pilot project to be done and you all need to be aware of how to do a pilot study also. Basically, I'm going to continue from where my previous speaker has left. Madam has nicely covered how to prepare a protocol, how to get it approved. Now, we are in a situation where you have prepared a nice protocol and it got approved. What is the next step? Next, we are expected to do the groundwork. How to really do the study? What are we are supposed to do? That is called the research strategy. You have to prepare your own research strategy for the type of study which you have in your hand. It is a step-by-step plan of action that gives direction to the research. It also helps you to conduct the research systematically as well as within a specific time. So what decides your research strategy? Can you have your own individualized strategy? No. Your research strategy is basically dependent on your research questions, research objectives, and how much time and resources you have to complete the research. There are 4 components for the research strategy. First is the research paradigm, then research design. Research paradigm is the framework of idea which you have with you. That decides your research design. So these things you do when you are planning your protocol itself. But after that, you have to have a research method and sampling process. When it comes to implementation, you have 4 important steps. First thing is, you list your requirements. You have a protocol, you know what you are going to do. But before starting the study, you need to list what are your requirements. Like what equipment you are going to use, do you have all the consumables which are needed for the research, and the staffs and facilities which are needed for conducting the research. The second step is to plan for data acquisition and recording. You can't do this after starting the research. This should have been well planned, well in advance before you actually get into the field. So here what you are going to look into, you are going to decide on what type of data I am going to acquire, what is the method in which I am going to acquire and how I am going to store this data. The third step is planning for analysis and research. This also should be well planned before starting your study, where you will be planning how to prepare your research as well as what statistical package you are going to do and how to present your data. Whether you are going to use tables, whether you are going to use pictures, all those things should be well decided before starting the study. The fourth step, as I said, is an optional step, conducting a pilot study, but you should be aware how to do it. It is needed to confirm your equipment as well as to clarify your timing and logistics. Now let's move on to the steps in conduct of research. What is the first step after getting approval from ethics and scientific committee? Can anyone suggest what will be the first step? Enrollment? Yes? Recruitment? No. The first step you are supposed to do after getting all the approval is trial registration. In today's era, you cannot publish any article without getting registered in a particular registry. This is also very important because if without registering, you will not be getting a number which is given by the certain registries. Now, where will you register? There's clinical trial registries which are there all over the world. Every country has got its own registry. These are recognized by International Committee of Medical Journal Editors. These are the group of people who decides how a journal should run, which type of article should be considered for publication. So they decide which country is the clinical trial registry of particular country will be approved by these people. Now, as far as India is concerned, previously some 20 years back, India never had any registry on its own. When we started our research, we used to register in Australian Trial Registry India. It is a free online platform. It will be of, you will regret at the later part. Now, as I said, the need is, one is, none of your journals will, the other reason why you need to register is, it gives transparency and go inside and search what type of researches are going on all over India. So it gives a complete transparency. The other reason why is to prevent duplicate research. Like today you got an idea, you thought of doing a research on it. Probably 1 year before somebody in Calcutta would have had the same idea and he must be doing the research on the same idea. So you will be duplicating the research. So once you register here, the committee will assess, you will get access to the already running studies so that you need not do the same project again, which already someone else is doing. Now when to register? Is it important? Yes, it's very, very important. You are supposed to register it before the enrollment of the first patient or the first participant. This is called prospective registration. What if I register after the enrollment of first patient or after completion of the study? After completion, if you enroll a study, that becomes a retrospective registration, and today's date, none of the journals will consider, the standard journals will not consider any of the retrospectively registered manuscripts. So to be considered for a publication itself, it needs to be registered prospectively. So prospectively means, what I mean is, you are supposed to register at least 3 months before the start of the study. Why? Because this registry takes some time to analyze your research, your protocol, and then to come out with a definite decision that yes, you can go ahead and do the study. It takes 2 to 3 months. So till you get that number, please don't start the study. And you are expected to enter so many elements when you are registering for the clinical trial registry. Almost some 20 elements are minimum which needs to be entered. Among various elements, I would like to stress on some of the elements which is relevant for my talk. That is the key inclusion and exclusion criteria, date of first enrollment, target sample size, and recruitment status. All these data you have to enter before starting your study. Mind you, this you cannot change, come back and change it in a later part of time. If you do any mistake when you are entering, you cannot come, they won't allow you to come back and change your date of enrollment or your target sample size. So be careful when you are registering in the clinical trial registry. Now that you are registered in the clinical trial registry, you got a number, you are ready to start your study. Now what is first next step? The next step is study tool validation. What is study tool validation? What is study tool first? Study tool is something which you want to study in your research. It could be a new device which you have designed, which you want to test in your research. Or majority of the time, when we talk about study tool, it's about questionnaire or surveys, where you created your own survey, your own questionnaire, and you wanted to test it out in participants. That is where the study tool validation comes into picture. It is degree to which an instrument measures what it is supposed to measure. You have created a questionnaire, you should know whether it will be able to give the details which you wanted to get for the particular questionnaire. It is also important for generalizability of their findings. Why we are all doing study? If you do a study, you get something and you want to tell the world that you do this, this will happen. This is called generalizability. You do it in a specific population and you explore to the entire world. But in order to happen, you need to make sure that the tool which you are using is validated. Let's see how we can validate this tool. There can be two types of validity, that is internal validity and external validity. In internal validity, it's about how the research findings match reality, or it relates to how well a study is conducted. Like you use it within the study participant and you make sure that all of them give definitive results when you use the particular study tool. Let's say you have discovered a new thermometer and you're saying that it's better than the currently available thermometer. You want to test it in your participant and see that whether it is giving accurate results or not. This is called internal validity. What is external validity? The same device which you tested in your study should give the exact values when it is tested in the outside population also, those who are not a part of your study also. This is called external validity. So whatever tool you are going to use for your research, it should be both internally valid as well as externally valid. Then only it will be of use. Next, there are other types of validity also, like face validity, content validity, criterion validity, and construct validity. I'll briefly run through this. The face validity is, let's say you have prepared a questionnaire. It consists of some 20 questions. You want to give it to all the participants here to find out how was the program. As an investigator, I think looking at, yeah, I have 20 questions. This 20 questions is enough. So looking only at the face value, the numbers, 20 questions is more than enough to assess the participants. This is called face validity. But these questions may not be maybe totally irrelevant to what I am trying to achieve. So face validity is considered as a least scientific method and we should never use it. Then what is a better way to do it? It's a content validity. Instead of looking at only the number 20 questions, you read each of those questions. Is these questions are relevant to what I am trying to achieve from all the participants? If yes, that is called content validity. But here also it is not good enough. Why? Because here again, as an investigator, I am the only person who is assessing my work again and again. I prepared this 20 questions and I assume that these 20 questions are enough. Maybe tomorrow sir is seeing the questions and he sees this is totally irrelevant. So this should likely to happen. So it is very subjective. So content validity is also considered as not of much use. Next is the criterion validity. What is criteria validity? You compare it with already an existing questionnaire. Like you wanted to assess all the participants whether how much they have learned. There must be some other questionnaire which is already prepared and published in some other journal. So you take out that and compare with your own questionnaire. If you compare that and you find it, you get the similar answer, then it is called a criterion validity. This can be either predictive or concurrent. Predictive means you do it after a certain period of time. Concurrent means you do it simultaneously, both the questionnaires, and try to assess the participants. The last is the construct validity, which is very important. We all think that doing a questionnaire study is very easy, doing a survey is very easy, I can easily publish this. But this is the most toughest job to do. Because proving the reviewers that your questionnaire is valid or it is a standard is the most tough job. Getting the study is easy, but proving it is very difficult. Ideally, if you do a questionnaire study or a survey study, that has to be prepared by at least 3 to 4 investigators, not a single person. If I want to do it, I have to include 3-4 authors who are of the same knowledge. We all sit together and prepare the questionnaire. Now that is also not enough. If 4 people are prepared, that also will not be accepted. You have to send it to external experts, at least 5 to 6 external experts all over India. Like I send it to AIIMS Delhi, AIIMS Jodhpur, or if I'm doing a study in anesthesia, I send it to experts all over there, and they vet your questionnaire. And they should give the approval that yes, with these changes, this questionnaire can be used for research. That is how a questionnaire study comes into. So you should tell the reviewer also when you send it for publication, how the particular questionnaire is validated, who are all the external experts who are consulted for the validation of the questionnaire. That needs to be clearly told to the reviewers. Now, we often confuse validity with reliability. Reliability is something which tells you how consistently a method measures something. That is, when you apply a same method to the same sample under the same condition, you should get the same results. We'll see in detail how reliability works. There are 4 types of reliability. The first one is test retest. What I mean by test retest is, you have a questionnaire, I gave it to one candidate. After some time, I am giving again to the same candidate the same questionnaire. I should be able to get the same result every time I give it to the same candidate after a certain break of time. This is called test retest. The other one is inter-rater. Today I am giving one questionnaire to one participant. Tomorrow sir is giving the same questionnaire to other participant. Whoever is the investigator, they should be able to get the same results. This is called inter-rater reliability. The next one is the parallel forms where you prepare different versions. What I mean by different version is usually a questionnaire study will have certain sections, section A, B, C, D. You change these sections and then try to give it to different participants and try to get the same results. This is called parallel forms. The last one is internal consistency, where the individual items, like you have 20 questions, first you check only the first 5. If they are able to get good results from the first 5, then you move on to the next 5. This is called internal consistency. Now to understand the difference between validity and reliability, the first picture is where, which we call it valid as well as reliable. That is, it's bang on target, at the same time it is repeatedly able to target the same area. Second picture where it is at the target, but the dots are spread over differently, widely spread. That means it is not a reliable test. Third picture, it is reliable. It is repeatedly able to give the same results, but that is not on target, far away from the target. The last one is what we call it as inaccurate and unreliable, neither accurate nor reliable. So when you use a study tool, it should be both valid as well as reliable. So before starting a study or before deciding on a particular study tool, make sure that it is valid as well as reliable. Let's move on to the other step, which is very important, that is sampling. How we are going to do sampling. Sampling is not one single step, it is a process where it involves multiple steps. The first step is identifying and defining the target and sample population. So we need to know what is target population and what is sample population. We'll come to that soon. The second step is specifying a sampling unit. After identifying what is the sample population, you need to specify what is the sampling unit. The third step is specifying a sample selection method. How I am going to select the particular sample from the total target. So this is fourth step is only the determining the sample size. So I am not going to cover about the determining sample size. There is a separate talk on this. So I will be talking about the first three steps. Now let's move on to see what is sample. The sample population is what you are going to study in your research. The target population is the entire population. So there is a whole population, and from that you are going to pick certain number of people. They are called the sample population. They should always be the representative of your target population. Next, let's say you want to study on pregnant patients in Pondicherry. This is your target population. The target population is pregnant patients in Pondicherry. But you cannot go and study all the pregnant patients. Let's say for epidemiological study or from field study, you can't go door by door and find out and call all the pregnant patients and include in your study. You have a very limited sample size. Now, how will you pick only specific number of samples from the entire Pondicherry? We'll come to that. So the second step is specifying sampling unit. So after selecting the sample size also, you may have to have some inclusion and exclusion criteria. If you incorporate those criteria, some of the patients will get left out and only very few you can actually include into your research. The last step is the sampling method. That is process of selecting a sample population from the target population. We'll see how we need to do sampling. There are two types of sampling. One is probability sampling, other one is non-probability sampling. Probability sampling is random selection. You have 1,000 pregnant patients in Pondicherry and randomly you pick 100 pregnant patients for your study. You don't have any specific criteria. After what I meant is after including the inclusion and exclusion criteria. So every patient has got a chance of being part of your study. All subjects in the target population have equal chances to be participate in your study. This can in turn be divided into simple random, stratified random, systematic random and clustered random. Similarly, non-probability sampling. What I mean by non-probability sampling is it is a non-random selection or the selection is by choice. I decide. The participants don't have the right. I can say that I pick that row first patient, this row first patient, like that I will pick. So that is totally a pre-planned one. It is a non-systematic process and does not carry equal chance for the subjects. This can also be divided into convenient sampling, judgmental sampling and snowball sampling. I'll briefly run through each of the samplings because you need to know how sampling is done. That's one of the important areas which many of the reviewers will be interested. So simple sampling is where it's mostly applicable in field studies. What I mean by field study are PSM people will be doing studies where you have access to the entire population. You know how many, from a database you get number of pregnant patients in Pondicherry, you have the entire list of it. When you have such a list, you can draw a sample from it either by lottery method or computer generated random list. Lottery means you write all their names, put it in a box, pick 100 patients from there, those 100 will be part of your study. We can do it currently we will do it by the computer generated random numbers. What is stratified? It is just modification of your simple random where you are going to divide the pregnant patients based on either age or because of their financial status. Accordingly we will decide. Let's say from 20 to 25 years will be in one strata and 25 to 30 years age group will be in one strata. From each group you take 50-50 patients. This is called stratified random sampling. Next is systematic random sampling or interval sampling. Where we are going to list all the patients in a series. You are going to start from a random number, either it can be 7, 3, 10, anything. And you are going to fix a fixed interval also. The fixed interval is, you can decide on that. Let's say you want to start from 5 and you want to do a fixed interval of 5. Then it goes from 5, 10, 15, 20. You pick the 5th patient, 10th patient, 15th, 20th. Like that you will be picking patients for your study. The last one in probability sampling is cluster sampling, where you will be dividing all the population based on their cluster. Let's pregnant patients in Pondicherry, you divide them into those in Laspet, those in Ariangopam, those in Mudalayarpet, you divide accordingly and pick certain clusters from there. Either you pick 2-3 clusters and again you redo. This is called multi-stage sampling. So again you divide them, you find a random sample from those clusters. This is called cluster sampling or multi-stage sampling. Now we'll move on to the most important part as far as our clinicians are concerned. We are like I'm talking about anesthesiologists or for that because we don't have access to the entire population at the start of our study. We are not doing field study or we are not doing epidemiological studies. For clinical studies, we are left with only one option, that is convenience sampling. What is convenience sampling? It is the most applicable and widely used method. Let's say you are sitting in an OPD, you want to include pregnant patients. So whoever pregnant patient comes to OPD in SLIMS, you include it in your study. This is according to your convenience, according to patient's convenience, you include them to the research. This is called convenience sampling. It is quick, inexpensive, and very convenient also. So most of our studies which we will be doing in our hospital setup will come under this convenience sampling only. Now next is judgmental sampling, where the subjects are selected by choice of the investigators. I feel like including some 5 patients from my area, so I will pick those patients and include it. This is biased. So I am picking according to my wish. So it is of course a non-probability sampling, and it's called judgmental sampling or purposive sampling. The other one is snowball sampling. What is snowball sampling? You include one participant, and that participant will help in bringing the other participants. Let's say you want to do a study on an HIV patient. You don't get HIV patients in your OPD, some 10, 20 patients. Only one patient will come in a week or so. You pick the patient, and as the patient, you give contact of whoever HIV patients you know, and so that I can include them in my study. So that patient gives the other patient, that patient gives another patient, like that you keep adding the patients to your study. This is called snowball sampling. So though there are different types of sampling, as far as clinicians are concerned, particularly those who are in anesthesia or other medical fields, we need to remember about the convenience sampling only. Now let's move on to the next step, that is randomization. Randomization is very important. If you don't do randomization, the study will be null. So what is randomization? It is an important and distinct aspect of randomized control style. I hope you all had a good session on study designs yesterday, where they were talked about qualitative, quantitative. Among the quantitative, you have RCTs, cohort, case control, different types of studies are there. This randomization holds only for the randomized control trials, where you know there are 2 groups will be there. One will be control and one will be the intervention group. What we are trying to do is to make sure that patients are randomly assigned to each group. That as an investigator, I don't decide which patient goes to control group and which patient goes to intervention group. It is decided by the random number which is generated before starting the study. So this important step which needs to be done before starting the study. So it helps to either control, the patients get selected to either control or intervention group. This is the only way to avoid selection and confounding bias. That is, I should not have any bias when I put a patient in a particular group, whether to go to control or intervention group. Now there are different types of randomization again. It can be simple, block, stratified block, or dynamic. In simple randomization, it is based on single sequence of random assignments. It is usually used for studies with a large sample size. When you have some 300, 400 sample size, you can conveniently use simple randomization. How you will do? A patient comes to your OPD, you want to include in your study, you don't know whether to include in control or intervention. You toss a coin, if it's head, the patient goes to control group, if it is tail, the patient goes to the intervention group. That's the easy way of doing it. You can use a dice, you can use card, anything. But currently what we are using is a computer generated random sequence. We generate a random sequence number based on which the particular patient goes to control or intervention group. So how a computer generated random sequence is generated? When you put in computer generated random sequence, this sort of numbers will be generated. If you look at the right side, the computer generated sequence is 4, 8, 3, 2, 7, like that. You fix all even numbers goes to group A and all odd numbers goes to group B. So accordingly you see down 4, 8 are even numbers, both the patient goes to group A. 3 is odd number, they go to group B. So like that you have to randomize. So here there is no bias involved, you don't have any control. The numbers are already generated. According to the number, the patients will be distributed to control or intervention group. Similarly, we can do for 3 groups also, where 1 to 3 can be group A, 4, 5, 6 can be group B, and 7, 8, 9 can be group C. And different sample size also, like one group can have 30, other group can have 60. Such situations also can be easily handled by computer generated random sequence numbers. Next, move on to block randomization, where it is designed to randomize subjects into blocks, as we saw in sampling, the block sampling. Similarly, here we create blocks. This is usually used for small groups. Because in small groups, even if you do simple randomization, there is likely that a particular group of patients will go to one group and particular set of patients may go to other groups. So whenever you have a small sample size, routinely what we do, 30, 50, 60 sample size, it is ideally better to do a block randomization, where we divide all patients into blocks, block 1, block 2, block 3. After that, we divide them into intervention and control group. Next, stratified block. As you saw, stratified means you divide them based on the age, sex, or income. You divide them into different strata, male, female, and then divide them into control, so that you get equal number of male and female in each group. This is called stratified block randomization. Dynamic randomization. This is something which is purely biased, where you decide, you allotted one patient to control, you saw what is the next patient, that patient you wanted to put it in the intervention group. There is no blinding involved in that. You decide which patient goes to which group. This is a biased randomization, not recommended for any of the clinical research. The next step is allocation. Often we confuse randomization and allocation. We think that we have done randomization, our job is done, we can easily publish our work, or we can authentically say that I have done the research in a proper manner. But allocation is totally a different aspect of, other than the randomization. It's the next step of randomization. You have created random numbers, but you should also make sure that the technique used to implement the sequence. Generating sequence is one step, that is randomization. But how you are going to implement it when it comes to field. So an allocation consignment process keeps the clinician and participants, both of them, unaware of the upcoming assignments. So if you keep it concealed, you don't know what the next patient is going to pick, and according to that, whether he is going to go control or intervention, even you don't know, neither the patient will know. This is called allocation concealment. There are also different ways of doing allocation concealment. The most commonly used technique is sequentially numbered, opaque, sealed envelopes, the snooze technique. This is the most commonly employed, and you all should practice this. As the name suggests, it is a sequentially numbered. You number it 1, 2, 3, 4 like that, and it should be the opaque cover, and it should be completely sealed. When a patient comes and picks up his cover, you need to write the name of the patient on that cover. After writing it, you open the cover, you see what is the sequence which is given for this patient. Accordingly, you allot the patient to particular intervention. It can be either control or intervention group. The envelopes are opened sequentially only after the participant details are written on the envelope. So people, what they've seen is, what they've done is, with this, there are a lot of misconduct started happening. They wanted to put the patient to control group instead of intervention group. So other way of doing it is using a sequentially numbered containers. But these containers should be tamper-proof, equal in weight, and similar appearance, so that there is no bias involved while picking up the container. You can also ask your pharmacy to allocate these patients by concealing their identity. Similarly, central randomization, where you have a separate office. Multi-center trials will have a separate office for this allocation. They call the patient and tell them that which group they go. Either the investigators will know which group the patient is going to come. So the next step is blinding. Blinding, as you all know, most of you must be already aware, those who are into research. Blinding is concealment of group allocation from one or more individuals, that is the stakeholders in the research. In any research, who are the stakeholders? The participants, the patients, the investigator, and the outcome assessor, who is going to assess the outcome. So you need to make sure that none of them gets aware which patient, this particular intervention is given to which patient. So it is also important and distinct aspect for randomized control trials. You cannot use this in your case control studies or your observation studies. This can also be either unblinded or open label trial, single blind, double blind, triple blind. Unblinded or open. I said blinding is important, but how can we allow unblinded trials or open label trials? Yes, there is an option to do a open label trials, and it will still be considered as a good research. All the people will be aware of intervention. When situations will come, when you want to do a study on a surgical procedure, one group of patients are getting open laparotomy, another group is getting laparoscopy, there is no way you can do blinding. Everybody will come to know, patient will come to know, investigator will come to know, assessor will come to know. So such surgical procedure, there is no scope for blinding. You have to do an unblinded or an open label trial. Similarly, life-threatening situations, you are doing a study on chest compression, CPR, resuscitation, you can't do blinding. Ethical considerations where you are not allowed to do blinding, or when you cannot generate a control group. Both are interventional groups and both are different types of intervention, you cannot do blinding. Single blind is at least one of them should be blinded. Usually it will be the participants or the investigator. Double blind is both the participant as well as the investigators will be blinded. They don't know the patient falls into which group. This is the most commonly and most recommended for majority of our clinical trials. Triple blind, all three of them, patients, investigators as well as the assessors. All three of them will not know which patient falls into which, goes into which group, what type of intervention they are getting. So the last step which I said, which is optional, need not be done in all researchers. As postgraduate research, we don't expect you to do pilot research and all. It's usually in a high level research where a lot of issues are likely to come, it's better to do a pilot research. Pilot study is otherwise called a feasibility study. It's a small scale preliminary study conducted before original study. It helps in identifying and evaluate the design issues, feasibility, practicality, resource, time and cost, whether you're able to finish the study within the specified time and within the specified fund. It also helps to predict an appropriate sample size. Most of you would have come across, as Madam said, in ethics committee or scientific committee, they will ask you how do you calculate the sample size. If you have a pre-existing study, you can calculate from that. But if you're something new you are doing, you don't have a reference for calculate your sample size. So they usually ask you to conduct a pilot study and find out what number of samples you will be needing to prove your theory. The other advantage is you can budget accordingly and you can also improve your study design. If you have decided your sample size for the main study and you want to do pilot study, how many patients you can do? Usually it is recommended not more than 10% of your actual sample size. You should not be considered for the pilot study. And you should not include these data in your original analysis also. It's got a limitation also. You need extra cost, time and resource if you want pilot study. The likely contamination, the data can be used for final analysis. Funding bodies may think that your pilot study is not going good. They may stop your funding also. And it also doesn't guarantee the completion of your original study. So you need to be careful when you are planning a pilot study. It can backfire also. It's a double-edged sword. So don't blindly go to pilot study for all your research. So before finishing the last two slides, I want to stress again why all these steps are important. So many of you will be thinking, what if I do a study skipping all these steps? You should not do it because for reporting your study, there are certain guidelines which are issued by the international committees, depending upon the type of trial. These are randomized trials, you have something like consult, observation studies, TROP, systematic reviews, PRISMA. So you are expected to fill those checklists before submitting your manuscript for publication. What is there in the checklist? Whatever we have seen so far in the methodology, every single point you are expected to fill when you fill this checklist when you are about to send this manuscript for any international journals. Like sample size, how the sample size was calculated, whether interim analysis was done or not, randomization, what type of randomization, what type of allocation, what type of blinding. Every single checklist you have to fill up and send it, then only your article will be considered for publication. So you will realize how important all these steps which you have seen so far, and you should make sure that you don't skip any of those steps. To conclude, prospective trial registration is mandatory. Always consider registering it well in advance before starting a study. Study should be both valid as well as reliable. The most common techniques, depending upon what type of study you are doing, the sampling, you should see convenient sampling is the most common technique. When it comes to randomization, it is simple randomization by computer-generated sequence. When it comes to allocation, it is the snooze technique. When it comes to blinding, it should be double blind. If you read any article from international journals, you will see in the methodology, all these factors will be covered. How they have done sampling, how they have done randomization, how they have done allocation, how they have done blinding. Thank you.